So unit number 1 is where we started to look at economics, what economics is all about, right? So in terms of what economics is all about, the most likely questions that you get from the lecturer are questions that have to do with the issue of identifying the problem of economics, right? Or identifying what we call the questions of economics, right? So that's on the issue of the definition of economics. So whenever we define economics, the key principle of economics is the difference between scarcity being represented by limited resources, and unlimited wants, right? The people that are demanding a lot of things, right, that are not available. So that's the key definition of economics. So whenever you see a question that is asking anything to do with what is economics or what are we studying under economics, the key principle is scarcity. Yes, we study opportunity cost. Yes, we study choice. Yes, we study all of these different things, but the key principle of what we study in economics is scarcity, which means 90% of the time, the answer for that question will be scarcity. I'm not saying every time, but 90% of the time, the answer for that question will be something to do with scarcity, something to do with limited resources, something to do with the mismatch between scarcity and unlimited what and unlimited ones, because that's what economics is all about. So that's a typical question, right? Then secondly, another type of question that you will likely face that comes particularly from this section, from unit number 1, is questions to do with the differences between microeconomics and macroeconomics. In your study guide, you have got a table that your lecturer provided you, where he gives you a lot of different examples so that you are able to tell what is macro and what is micro. Right? But in essence, when you're looking at the difference between macroeconomics and microeconomics, macroeconomics is the broad type of economics, the types of economics whereby you're looking at the whole of South Africa, where you're looking at the economy of South Africa, at unemployment of all of the South African citizens, at the general price level of South Africa. Those types of economics, that's macroeconomics. But when it's micro, you're now looking at the individual parts of economics. You're looking at the price of a tomato, a single tomato, the price of a car, or the price of vegetables within a market. As long as it's within one market, it's still micro, regardless of the fact that there are 20 farmers within that market, but it is still microeconomics. So that's another question that you can likely get in this particular topic, right? Then another question is to do with identifying whether a statement that the lecturer is given you is a positive statement or a normative statement, right? When we say something is a positive statement, we are saying something is factual, something can be proven, right? So for example, if I say the unemployment rate of South Africa is 23%, that's a fact. You can go to Statistics South Africa and get the unemployment rate. It's a fact, right? But if I say the government ought to increase the grants to the people so that things can improve in South Africa, that's now an opinion that I have. Because sometimes even if the government was to increase the grants, it might not improve anything in South Africa, right? So that's an opinion. That's a statement where I'm saying something ought to be at the end of the what? At the end of the day, right? So that's another typical question that you might get specifically looking at a unit such as unit number 1, right? So most likely, that's what you would get in unit number 1. Now, for the guys doing advanced diploma, you guys don't have, there's a specific unit that you don't have, but it's part of what you should learn. So that unit is called the production possibility curve, right? The production possibility curve. But before that, I think there's one more question that I left that you can get under unit number 1, the 3 economic questions. Right. Remember, we said what to produce, how to produce, and for whom to produce. Those three economic questions. Usually, one of those questions will be asked in the exam. So usually he will tell you, identify what is this question. Is it the what question? Is it the how question? Is it the what? The for whom question. It will give you a statement and you have to identify where it falls. Or alternatively, he might ask you to explain. How do you answer a question? How do you answer the what question? How do you answer the how question? And how do you answer the for whom question? So the what question is a question of the product, right? It's a question asking, what should we produce? And that question is answered by the consumer, right? It is not the producer that answers that question. It is the consumer, because the consumer is the one who consumes, who demands. So they are the ones that are supposed to answer that question normally in a market economy. But if you go to a command economy, you'll find that there's a central planning authority that might answer that question for the consumer. The question of how to produce is answered by the business, because the business is the one that produces. So they know how they are going to mix the different resources that they have in order to answer that particular question. Then the answer of for whom is usually answered by the market, i.e. the different market forces, the prices in the market forces, the issues of self-interest in the market forces, the issues of profit maximization in the market forces. Those are the questions that answer how to distribute or for whom to distribute a particular product. So that also is a question that you can find under unit number 1. Then, like I said, there is a unit that you guys don't have, but the first year students actually have that unit, where you speak more about the production possibility curve, the PPC. So that on its own, you can actually have multiple questions on that particular topic of the production possibility curve. Question number 1 that you are likely to get under that topic is the issue of opportunity cost, right? Opportunity cost, there are 3 scenarios or 3 types of questions that you get on opportunity cost. The first question on opportunity cost is a very simple and straightforward question, where the lecturer will tell you that this person is a choice. They can either get a bicycle, they can either get a car, or they can get a bus, and they've chosen to get a bicycle. So what is their opportunity cost? It's a very straightforward question. I don't think you guys are going to struggle with that one, because usually the wording in the question tells you what is the next best alternative forgone by that particular individual. The second type of question that you can get on opportunity cost is the much more difficult question. This one is the question where you have to do your workings, right? Where you are now asked to, what is the opportunity cost? And the answers are, the opportunity cost is 1,000, is 2,000, is 3,000, something like that. We are supposed to calculate. So when you are calculating opportunity cost, right, you have to think of it this way, right? If you make a choice or if you make a sacrifice, right, the choice that you're making, right, you are not going to pick just one thing and say, this is my opportunity cost. You are going to pick the things that all contribute to the choice that you have made. So, for example, I think we've done some of those examples. Where, for example, let's say that a football player, right, was supposed to play in a particular match, right, and then they are given a red card for that particular match. So they are no longer able to play in that particular match. So if we are going to estimate the opportunity cost of that football player, we are going to talk about the money that they were going to receive from that particular match, right? We're going to talk about all of the different fees that the club was going to pay, right? All of the different benefits that we're not just going to pick one thing, but everything that they have forgone, we are going to lump it up in terms of addition. And then we're going to subtract also the things that they had to pay. So if they were supposed to get into that match, they were supposed to pay an appearance fee or some insurance fee and whatnot, we need to subtract it because they are no longer going to experience that. So it can no longer be counted in that part in terms of the opportunity cost. So those are some of the difficult parts that you might find yourself in. In terms of calculating opportunity costs. So this one might be a little bit of a difficult question, but what I would advise you is some of these questions, I always say, go through the whole paper first. After you're done, Now go back to those difficult questions and then start thinking about it. You can even try to go online and search to see if that question is not already there online or something like that, right? Then, so that's the second question on opportunity cost that you might get, right? Third question on opportunity cost that you might get is graphical, right? Where the lecturer wants you to show which area shows the highest opportunity cost, which area shows the highest opportunity cost, or calculate opportunity cost using the graph, right? So whenever you're talking about opportunity cost on a graph, opportunity cost increases. Normally, it increases. So which means the further away you are from point zero or from the origin, the higher the opportunity cost. Let me show you a graph here so that you get what I'm saying. So this is the origin. This is zero here. This is the origin. So as you go this way, or as you go this way, the opportunity cost will increase. The opportunity cost will what? Will increase. So if it gives you a lot of points, just know that the point that is furthest away from point zero is the one where you're saying that what is the highest opportunity cost, right? So that's questions on opportunity cost. Then you can also get questions on the production possibility curve itself, the PPF, right? So when you are looking at the PPF, right, the type of questions that you can get, question number one, it's most likely to do with the opportunity cost. Is someone asking something, or it's just a mic that's muted? Okay. All right. So under opportunity cost, the likely questions that you're, sorry, under the production possibility curve. Remember, production possibility curve is this one. Okay. What happened? That's the production possibility curve, right? PPF or PPC, right? So the most likely questions that you're going to get here, number one is questions on opportunity cost. Now, questions on opportunity cost, when it relates to this graph, is a question of identifying whether the organization is got increasing opportunity cost, constant opportunity cost, or decreasing opportunity cost. If the graph is curved like this one, then that's increasing opportunity cost. If it is a straight line graph, then that's constant opportunity cost. If it is curved like this, then that's decreasing opportunity cost, right? So the most common type of opportunity cost is increasing opportunity cost. But if you see a graph like this, if it does like this, then we actually say that this graph does not exist, because this graph denotes that the economy has what? Has no scarcity. It has no scarcity at the end of the what? At the end of the day, right? So that's opportunity cost shown on the what? On the production possibility curve. But other questions that you can get on the production possibility curve is, number one, they might ask you, what does the production possibility curve represent? So production possibility curve represents the maximum output that a firm can make, so that an economy can make given the resources that it has. So because of that, some of the questions will now give you different points, and there will be point A, there will be point B, there will be point C, and there will be point D, something like that. So always remember, anything that is outside, it's unattainable, therefore it represents scarcity. Anything that is inside is inefficient, therefore it represents unemployment. Anything on the PPC represents efficiency, represents choice, represents opportunity cost first by the what? By the organization, by the economy at the end of the what? At the end of the day, right? So that's question number two on the production possibility curve. So the first one, it might do with the opportunity cost. The second one will be identifying what does this curve represent, or what a point on the curve represents. The third type of question that you can get under production possibility curve is movement of the curve, right? Where the curve moves from point A to point what? To point B. So when it comes to movement, if you see that it has moved on both sides, that is a shift of the production possibility curve. And it only shifts outwards if there is economic growth or an increase in the resources. And it shifts inwards when we've destroyed the economy or when we have lost some of our resources. So you have to understand what resources are. Remember, resources are labor, entrepreneurial skills, capital, right? And land, right? Those are the resources. So you might give you a scenario or an example. You might talk about immigration, you might talk about war, you might talk about all of those things, but you have to tie it back in which resource is it. And this specific resource, has it increased or has it decreased? And therefore, you can be able to identify whether the movement is outward or the movement is inward, right? Furthermore, you can get a question about what we call a swivel of the PPC, where it moves on only one side, right? So if it moves on only one side, then we say that there has been productivity or technological improvement in only one of the products that that economy is what is manufacturing at the end of the day. Right. So those are the type of questions that you can get under production possibility curve. So this is still unit number 1, but for the first years, I think it goes more into unit number 1, into unit number 2. All right. So the next now is unit number 2. Unit number 2 is the circular flow. Unless if there's someone with a question on what I just talked about. Oh, that's fine. So unit number 2 is the circular flow of income, right? So the typical questions that you get under the circular flow of income. Question number 1 usually has to do with the major flows of income, right? So you have to be able to know that there is the production flow, the income flow, and the spending flow. So he might give you different scenarios, production flow, money flow, and spending flow, and say identify the correct one. Just know that it's production, income, and spending. So that's a question that you might get. The second type of question is being able to differentiate between financial flow and flows of physical goods, right? So when we talk about flows of goods, we are saying the goods flow from the firms to the households, right? And the resources flow from the households to the firms. So that's the physical part. That's in one direction. But in the opposite direction, there are what we call financial flows. Financial flows are represented by the spending flow and the income flow. Right? The spending flow is the money that the people are spending for paying for the goods and services, and the income flow is the money that the organization is spending for them to get the resources that they need. So the physical flow is opposite the financial flow. So that's a typical question that you might also get. Right. Another question on unit number 2 is a question to do with the resources, the factors of production. Being able to identify the 4 factors of production. By now, I'm sure you guys know which are the 4 factors of production. But usually, you can make a mistake with capital. So the one that we want is physical capital, not financial capital. Financial capital is money. That is not a factor of production. That is not also a factor. So you cannot include it under factors of production. So once you know those 4 factors of production, you also need to know how are they paid for. If you're talking about land or resources, you're talking about rent. If you're talking about labor, you're talking about wages. If you're talking about entrepreneurs, you're talking about profit. And if you're talking about capital, you're talking about interest. So you might get questions that are also linked to that. Right. Question number 3 on this topic is questions that have to do with the diagram. So remember that those diagrams that we went through, these diagrams, right? So you might get questions now about these diagrams. So one of the questions might be looking at what types of markets do you get in these diagrams. So in terms of markets, remember we've got the factor market and we've got the goods market. So that's only found in the simple circular flow of income. But if you go into the more complex circular flow of income, you also find that you now have got the foreign exchange market. You might also have the financial market within the more complex diagram. But in the simple diagram, you've got the factor market and you've got the goods market at the end of the day. So you should also be able to identify the different arrows, where they are going and etc. But since you guys have got your study guide, I'm sure even if you draw a blank, you can always open your study guide and check the diagrams there so that you pinpoint the correct thing, because you might put some funny things, A, B, what is A, what is B, what is C, and etc. on the diagram. So that's another typical question that you might get on the circular flow of income. I don't think there's anything else there. Let's see, find the unit number 2. No, I think that's fine for unit number 2, right? We'll go to unit number 3, unless if there's a question on unit number 2. All right, unit number 3, demand, supply, and prices. So unit number 3, typically, you are not going to get a specific question on unit number 2, unit number 3, but you're going to get questions that are linked from unit number 3 up to unit number 4, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, unit number 3 and 4. Usually the questions are interlinked together because it's basically the same topic. It's just that unit 4 is a deeper version of unit number 3, right? So the questions that you're likely to get on this one are most likely going to be graphical. Related. It's very rare for them not to be graphical. Even if they're not graphical, they will need you to understand the graphics, the economics in the graphs. So the type of questions that you get here are questions in relation to, number 1, being able to differentiate between a shift in the demand curve and a movement along the demand curve. A shift in the demand curve is what we call a change in demand. A movement along the demand curve is what we call a what? What we call a change in quantity demanded. So that's one of the key principles. You always find a question that looks into that particular. It will not be as point blank as I'm highlighting it right now. You will hide it in a way, but essentially that question is trying to check if you understand the difference between those two things, right? So a change in the quantity demanded is where we say that you are moving along the same demand curve. Nothing has changed. You're moving from point A to point B, right? Which means that your quantity demanded is going to change. But the reason for this is because there has been a change in the price, right? And then a shift in demand, which is a change in demand, is where we say that the demand curve itself has moved. You now have got demand curve 1 and demand curve number what? Demand curve number 2. Right. So that's typical question number 1. It's trying to assess whether you understand those things. Question number 2, we will look at your understanding of the determinants of demand, right? So it will give you scenarios that this particular situation has happened in this particular market. Do you understand how that affects demand, how that affects supply for that particular market, how that's going to change the equilibrium within that particular market? If you don't understand that section, please go back and rewatch the video where we did it in detail, because it's impossible for me to give you like a short version of the answers, right? But in short, you just have to understand that if you're looking at a movement of one thing, for example, if it is a movement in demand, if supply is constant and demand increases, you have to understand, okay, the equilibrium price will go up, the equilibrium quantity will go up. If supply is constant and the demand decreases, the equilibrium price will go down, the equilibrium quantity will go down. If demand is constant and it is supply that is changed. For example, let's say supply is increased and the demand is constant. Then you know, oh, the equilibrium price will go down and the equilibrium quantity will go up. But if supply is decreased, but demand is constant, then you know that the equilibrium price will go up and the equilibrium quantity will go down. So you have to understand those different types of relationships for you to be able to what? For you to be able to answer those type of questions. These ones, if you can, I remember when we did that lecture, there were some little notes that we did there. Take note of them. Have them like a little thing on your side, which you can help you to be able to quickly pinpoint what is happening in that particular market, because you have to know. Otherwise, you will not be able to make it for those particular questions, because they will be so confusing some of the times. There will be a lot of things that will be happening. But what is important is understand ceteris paribus also. If demand is the one that we are talking about, don't unnecessarily include supply. If supply is the one that we're talking about, don't unnecessarily include demand, unless if the question is including both of them at the same time, right? Unless the question is including both of them at the same time, right? So that's a question number 2. So question number 1, understand the difference between movement and shift, right? Question number 2, understand the determinants of demand and supply, right? How do they affect what is happening in that particular market? Then number 3, understand the equilibrium. What is an equilibrium, right? So when you understand the equilibrium, this is now where we introduce the issue of the price floors and the price ceilings, where you now have to understand that if I put a price floor that is above the equilibrium, it's gonna result in an excess in the market, excess supply. If I put a price ceiling that is below the equilibrium, it's gonna result in a shortage in that particular market. Right? So that's now understanding how the equilibrium works and how intervention by the government will influence or will change the way the market is operating at the end of the day. Right? Then if by any chance there is a question about calculating the equilibrium, usually he can give you 2 equations, right? So for example, you might say that demand is equals to, let's say maybe 5 plus 3x, right? And then he says supply is equals to minus 2 plus 13x, right? So for example, let's say that's what he has given you, and then he tells you calculate the equilibrium. The equilibrium is where demand and supply meets. So its demand is equals to supply, which means you just take the equation 5 plus 3x is equals to minus 2 plus 13x, right? So that's what you, okay, is equals to. So that's what you simply do, right? And then you solve for the equation. Remember, you've done algebra. So like terms together, 3x and 13x on the same side, 5 and minus 2 on the other side, and then you solve for that particular equation, right? So that's something that you might also find under unit 3 and under unit number 4. Let me see if there's anything else under those units that is important. Okay, you might get, but this one I think I've explained it properly. Remember when we were doing the lecture, we talked about horizontal summation of the demand curve. So there are some exams where I've seen you will give you the different types of demand. So for example, he will tell you that, or supply, he will tell you that SPAR will supply, let's say, 100 cans of baked beans if the price is 50 Rand. And then Mr. Price will supply this if the price is that, and etc. and etc. And then he will ask you to calculate the market supply curve or the market demand curve at a particular price. So when you have been asked to do such a question, it's horizontal summation. Horizontal summation means you have to pick one price. You cannot say add the demand under 32 Rand and then the demand under 50 Rand and the demand under 70 Rand. That's wrong. If he says the price is 70 rand, you only add the demand that you have been told that is under 70 rand only. Anything else that is not under 70 rand, you do not add it. That's horizontal summation. You're saying that you are adding things that are similar. You're adding demands that are alike. This is the demand that will happen at that particular price, and that's the only demand that you are going to add. So that's another question that you might get under this particular topic. And let's see if there's anything else. But determinants are very, very important, because I can tell you, you might get 3 or 4 questions that work around the issue of determinants of demand and the issue of the graphs. How does it affect the equilibrium? How does it affect the equilibrium price? How does it affect the equilibrium quantity? How is it going to affect the demand curve? How is it going to affect the supply curve, etc. Right? Yeah. So you see this table here. I would advise you to have this little table with you when you're answering some of those questions, so that you can double check for yourself, right? You can double check, okay, this has happened, so this is going to happen, this has happened, so this is going to happen, this has happened, so this is going to happen, so that you don't make a mistake. This table exactly, it's very, very important. Make sure that you have it by your side when you answer the exam. It will help you quite a lot. Okay, let's see. Is there anything else that, yeah, this topic also. Consumer and producer surplus, right? So this topic usually is just one question. It's very rare for you to have more than one question. But the issue there is being able to understand and know what is consumer surplus and what is producer surplus. So remember, we say that you as an individual, right, when you are buying a product, sometimes you're willing to pay more for the product, but you're going to pay the market price. If I go and buy bread, I might be willing to pay 30 rand for a loaf of bread. But when I go to the shop, I'm not going to pay 30 rand. I'm going to pay 15 rand, because that's the price. So that's what consumer surplus is. We are saying that I am willing to pay more for the product, but I am paying the market price. So the consumer surplus is the difference between what I am willing to pay and what I eventually pay. So it's the same thing again with producer surplus. The supplier, for example, Spar, might be willing to sell bread at 10 rand. They might still make a profit. They might be willing to sell bread at 10 rand, right? But they might end up selling at 15 rand, because that's the market price, right? So the difference between what they are willing to sell the bread at and what they eventually sell the bread at is the producer surplus. And remember, producer surplus and consumer surplus represents the welfare of an economy, which is now affected when the government intervenes and results in welfare loss within that particular economy. So that's something that you might also be asked about under this particular topic. So that's our unit number, I think unit number 3 and 4. Okay, let's see if there's anything else under unit